Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. If you enjoy fun content and cool videos, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let's jump right in. I was a big deal in those days, at least as much of a big deal as I could be in high school. I was the star of my school's football team. My girlfriend was the hottest girl in class, and I was driving a Ford Mustang Mach 1, 1969. One of the finest cars in the world, and it was all mine thanks to a scout checking me out at one of our football games. Big talks of a scholarship with my name on it. I didn't understand how much potential I had until my dad turned to me after talking to the scout, with this excited glint in his eyes. That week, a black muscle car was parked in our driveway. My dad said it was mine. Times were different in the 70s. I got my license when I was 16. I knew some kids who got theirs when they were 15. Anyway, I was cruising through town all day that day with my father. One of my happiest memories. If anyone in the school didn't know my name by then, they all did when they heard the roar of that Mustang's engine when I arrived. Yeah, I was a bit of a douche in high school. But those who knew me also knew I was one of the nicest guys. My friend Clint said it was because I was very slow at times, which a lot of people found cute. I didn't care what they thought, as long as they knew I wasn't some thug despite my looks. I enjoyed having friends. Anyway, I tell you all of this because something big was going to happen. The entire class, about 50 17-year-old teenagers, were about to go on a camping trip. Tall trees, mountains, warm fields baking in the sun. Situated near a river was a large camp, with log cabins, a few fire pits, and even an outdoor cafeteria under a thatch roof. Not to mention the activities they had set up, even a classic obstacle course. Of course, it was a big deal. Even if we were almost technically adults, we still had that childish energy in us. We were thinking about swimming in the river, competitive camp games like tug-of-war, sneaking off after lights out with our girlfriends, and of course impressing anyone somehow during that trip, whether it was winning a foot race, a pull-up contest, or scoring in the bushes. We talked about all of this after the school announcement in the boys' locker room. "Nick, are you driving down there in the Mustang?" Clint asked me. "Of course," I said. "Sally and I are going together. So mind if I hitch a ride with you guys?" Clint asked in a hushed tone, looking around at the other guys. "Forget it, there's no room." "But you have 4 seats," Clint yelled. Everyone laughed. "Yeah, that's where our things go," I told him. "Put it in the trunk." I put my hand on top of his head and shook him around a little. "Then where would I put the beers?" I told him. There were a few cheers when the guys heard this. "Speaking of which, I am collecting cash so my big bro can get a beer. Anyone interested in getting on this, pay up. The more you give, the better the selection." Some paid up there and some paid later. Some made orders and put a little extra in. You have to understand that our entertainment was very limited compared to today. The movies had it right. Alcohol and sex were on our minds, very little else, truth be told. We were very organized when it came to setting up a party, at least most of the time. "Well, if you're bringing beers, then I guess I can ride the bus for a few hours," Clint said, suddenly very amiable. "Still, next time, pal." I parked outside Clint's house and angrily set the handbrake in place. I watched him practically skip out of the house with a pack on his back. After putting his things in the back seat, Clint opened the passenger door and hopped into the Mustang. "Hit it, lover boy," he said. "Shut the hell up." I snapped. All he could do was laugh as we set off. "Hey, I'm sorry Sally got sick," Clint said, twisting the cap off a soda bottle. He was very careful with it after I glared at him. "Yeah, me too," I muttered. We listened to the radio in silence. I stopped at the gas station before heading to school. I needed to fill up the tank in a jerry can. Always good to have a little extra for long trips. Clint kept slapping his legs to the tune like some anxious drummer who really needed to jam. He got really energetic when he had sugar. I was glad when we got out to confirm we were present and ready to follow. A few teachers weren't happy with me driving to camp. But when you have no real black marks on your record, your parents' permission, and the football coach heading the field trip, they really couldn't do anything. I was still more than a little frustrated. As we drove, I decided to break the silence by venting what was going through my head. Sally didn't seem sick when I talked with her the day before. I heard through the grapevine that her ex was also staying behind. Sally had a track record for choosing bad guys and cheating. She was one of those follow-your-heart type girls. I was prepared to give the trip a skip on that alone. but with a trunk full of alcohol that others paid for, I just felt obligated to go. My father also said something that bothered me. "Stand by her as long as she stands by you," he began. "And when you have nobody to stand by your values. No matter how much it hurts." I'd have happily taken lies and unfounded guarantees over some be the bigger man wisdom. "Do you think she would cheat on you?" Clint asked as I told him this. "I don't know. I'm not special," I said. "I'm not her first, I'm not—" Don't start with that bull," Clint said, easing back into his seat. He really knew how to make himself comfortable. "If she screws up what she has with you, she's an idiot. You'd be better off without her, but she sure as hell wouldn't be better off without you. I'd still be the idiot who trusted her." "Pfft, you've always been an idiot, Mr. Football Scholarship," Clint said. I thumped the side of his arm. "No offense. We all have our strengths. Anyway, your dad is right. You don't know if she is going to do anything, so try not to think about it." "Whatever. And they might not look it, but those other girls are something else," Clint said. "Her loss is another's gain." "What girls?" Clint pointed to the school bus in front of us. The back window wasn't the cleanest, but I could see a group of girls at the back waving at us. Clint leaned forward and turned up the music as loud as it could get. The girls whooped and raised their arms, but then suddenly faced forwards before sitting down in their seats. "Bet you that was Miss Weaver that shouted at them," Clint said, turning the music down. "Crazy bitch should have been left behind." I spent the rest of the trip watching Clint and one girl at the back of the bus mime an entire conversation, him saying things that made me laugh. If she could have heard him, she would have kicked his ass. We took a narrow, wavy road into camp. It wasn't too bad for the Mustang, but the bus struggled. At least somebody had thought ahead and cut back branches. I could see piles along the road and the flat stumps sticking out the trunks they had left behind. When we reached the spot, I parked the Mustang beside the bus. Clint and I grabbed our bags and joined the roll call. We were divided into different cabins. 2 girl cabins, 3 boy cabins. There certainly wasn't a shortage either, but I guess only some of them were prepared for us. After stowing our things, we were given a rundown of camp activities and the schedule they had set out for us. Looking back, I realize now that the whole camp thing was just to make the school look good. A photo opportunity to show off to parents and get more enrollments. I wouldn't have cared even if they made it obvious. Looking at that schedule, I just noted the free time they gave us. Morning, midday, and evening, except for the 5th day, which was a stargazing astronomy lesson. Blah. I used the first free. Slow to talk with the guys before we went to our assigned cabins. The plan was simple. Get the booze in the evening, conceal it in our bags, and then hide it in the cabin. There were only a few teachers and a couple of hired instructors. There weren't any room checks, nothing. These were lenient adults who wanted to enjoy their time there as much as we did. I wouldn't have been surprised if Coach Sykes brought his own booze. 1 or 2 from every cabin, Clint said. Bring empty bags. We can't all go to the Mustang. People will definitely notice. What time? Somebody asked. Late. After midnight, I said. We gotta make sure the teachers are asleep, so midnight is a good time. With the plan set, I was part of the 6 guys that would hike back up the bus in Mustang. I wasn't about to lend someone the keys to my car just so they could open the trunk. Besides, seeing as it was in my car, I would get in trouble anyway if things went to hell. Stop crowding the window, I told the guys in my cabin. We have to keep a lookout, Nick, one said. If you're caught, we ain't getting out a drink the rest of the week. Shut up, I said, sliding the window shut. I will get the damn beer. Tensions were high. The first 2 nights of our stay were screwed. One of the girls that first night swore she saw something in the woods and screamed, which set the teachers off thinking there were wild animals. Big deal, right? It's the forest, there's bound to be a few animals. A fact that didn't keep her from screaming her head off. It was a big joke the next day, but she wasn't laughing. The night after that was screwed thanks to a pair of lovebirds who crossed by right in front of one of the teachers' cabins. Big mistake. For that one, Coach Sykes kicked in every door to the guys' cabins and lectured us on late-night walks in the forest. When I regrouped with the others outside the cabin, we walked deep into the forest before rounding out towards the car. We kept the distant lights of the camp in sight. Just in case we lost our way, we were also far enough that we could talk on our walk. Got some news, guys, Clint said, grabbing one guy by the back of the neck, one of the lovebirds from the night before. Our buddy here got caught last night. Tell us something we don't know. One guy interrupted. Shut up. He got caught last night with his girl going for a stroll. What he failed to mention was that he wasn't going someplace with his girl. Oh no. They were, in fact, returning from their little rendezvous, Clint said, followed by his best French laugh. Bullshit, did he tell you that? No, this little bit of information came from Abigail who, get this, thanked him for a wonderful night right outside the girl's cabin this morning. You heard? The lovebird said. 3 cheers. For Stanley and Abigail tomorrow, Clint continued, patting Stanley's shoulder. For now, pay the stupid bastard back for almost costing us a great booze heist. Clint smacked the back of Stanley's head, followed by the rest of us who had a few soft hits in. With that matter settled, we cracked jokes and continued our climb up the hill. We soon found the familiar path that we took down to camp and stuck to that. It was slow going. You'd be surprised how dark it can get, and we weren't about to use flashlights. Luckily for us, the bus was easy to spot in the dark, so we stumbled over to it and approached the trunk of the Mustang. After unlocking the trunk, we started to pack our bags with the cans of beer. Why cans? One guy asked. Bottles make noise, I told him. Although I have a brandy bottle here for Max, who felt like being a little extra. Which cabin is Max in? Mine, hand it here, another said, taking it. Fucking brandy. Fucking brandy, we all repeated. Max always has to be special, huh? Well, he better share. We're not going to be able to take everything, Clint said. That's fine, I said. We missed the first 2 nights, so it works out. I closed the trunk and locked it. We tightened our packs and prepared ourselves for the walk back. It was going to be a lot harder. Liquid tended to slosh about, making balance tough. It would take even longer. Unfortunately, going slow was no longer an option. Near the path we took, we saw a flashlight. It bobbed with the person's movement, and for a moment we just stared at it. Then the light turned to us. Silently, we all turned to the forest and ran, knowing that if we said anything, our voice might be recognized. We had to leap over a short fence the vehicles were parked in front of. I could tell that a few of us had tripped over it. I heard glass break and another utterance of fucking brandy before we took the tumble down. Loose leaves, tall grass and twigs. I could tell we had entered the deeper forest when the grass thinned out, and all I heard was the crunch of twigs and leaves. I didn't run for more than 10 seconds before I noticed how quiet it got. I focused on making distance. Running with that weight on my back didn't faze me much. I'd been running with weights like that as part of my exercise routine. You need strong legs to play football. I started to veer to my left, knowing I needed to head back to the cabin. I was about to say the same to the others when I realized why it was so quiet. I didn't hear any other footsteps. The others must have separated, which was a smart move. It just seemed that I was the only one that ran so far before deciding to turn back to the cabin. I cursed when I realized that whoever was checking out the parking lot could go back to the cabins and make sure everyone was accounted for. If the others made it there before me, great. But how would they explain me and my pack missing? I kept running. A few minutes later, I saw the distant light of the camp. I slowed down to catch my breath and began creeping back to my cabin. If I moved too fast, someone might notice. Basic sneaking in the dark rules that everyone should know, which is why you never scan the darkness. You linger in spots to notice the small changes. Before I got close, I heard something. A repetitive beating sound, growing louder. A steady series of thumps and footfalls, then all I heard was a growl as something collided with my side, knocking the window out of me. I could barely catch my breath before I felt this pressure on my back and a viscous pulling. All I heard was snarling, and that weight was making it difficult to get air back into my lungs. I heard fabric rip as my pack was torn open. I heard claws on the cans, but then something crunched. I felt something wet hit the back of my head, and then I heard the hiss of the beer spraying out of the can. The pressure lifted for a moment, but the snarling remained. It got closer to my ear. I could feel the breath hit the back of my neck. I could hear it sniffing and growling soon after, just as it did before it bit into one of the beer cans. Light. A flashlight beam crossed through the trees, hitting me before going somewhere else. The pressure lifted off my body and I heard something running. I rolled over quickly to see something moving between the trees. It was massive. A dog-like creature that bounded from tree to tree before sprinting off into the darkness. I stayed still in the shadow of the tree. I heard the footsteps of someone. Whoever they were, they stopped just before my tree. The flashlight scanned back and forth over the forest before they turned around and walked back to camp. I steadied my breathing again when I thought they were out of earshot. The feeling of panic took a lot longer to settle. When I thought it was safe, I got everything together and made my way to the cabin. I took my time not just to be careful, but because I kept looking back. I reached up and knocked on the window. It slid open. Hands stretched out to take the pack, and then they helped me inside the cabin. In the dark, I got plenty of pats on the back. I was the last one, but no alarms were raised. Mission successful. "What happened to your pack?" someone asked. "Did you catch it on something?" "Looks like he already started. 2 cans are missing," another said. The mood was too good, and I was too disoriented to tell them anything. I decided not to say anything, but I was grateful it was dark. I didn't want them to see my face. That night was a mini party, as was the 4th night of our camping trip. Some booze slipped into one of the girls' cabins, but I wasn't complaining. I just tried to relax as best as I could after that. Being the camp hero, I had plenty of beer to help with that, but otherwise we were all fairly calm and quiet. On the 5th day, Clint shouldered me. "One of the cabins has gone dry," he said. "Max is one. I guess he needed the stronger stuff to keep him from overdoing it." "Too bad," I said. "I'm not going to get more." "Screw Max." "Yeah, my thoughts exactly," Clint nodded. "Besides, it's the last night. No chance of slipping past the teachers tonight, especially Coach Sykes." "What do you mean?" "Stargazing tonight," Clint said. "Remember? We're going for a night hike to the clearing to get a good look. Maybe I can smuggle some of my—" I stopped listening to him. I was busy thinking up excuses. The best excuse I could come up with was food poisoning. Not the blow chunks into the toilet, but the painful stomach imploding kind that made it difficult to go on hikes in the dark. Coach Sykes immediately saw it as his best football player needing some rest and recovery, so gave me a few pills and told me to hit the sack. Miss Weaver, however, would stay behind and keep an eye on things. She didn't want to leave one student behind in the camp while everyone went off on the hike. I think she was going to stay behind anyway. She was a little too old for it all as well. I didn't care. I just holed up in my cabin and breathed a sigh of relief. I saw her make the rounds, walking mostly between the cafeteria and the female teacher's cabin. I see her stop at some point to look out towards the river and the mountain behind it, smoking a cigarette. I couldn't really see her figure, but I could see the glow of the cigarette tip now and then. I joined her with my relaxation ritual. A few cans of beer were close by. I thought about the trip back home. Clint would be riding shotgun, I knew that much, but I wondered if the extra fuel from the jerry can would be enough. I tried recalling a gas station along the way. I crushed a beer can into a flat disc and added it to the rest. We would get rid of all of them in one shot. Couldn't leave any easy-to-spot cans lying around. With these mundane thoughts circling my mind, I decided that I was preoccupied, as well as liquored up, enough. It was time to get some sleep. I went to bed and waited for sleep to take me. I then heard the footsteps of someone walking outside. Looking up to glance through the gap in the curtains, I saw the familiar glow of a cigarette. I was about to lower my head when the shape shifted and a second glow appeared, to fiery sparks in the darkness that weaved from side to side. I didn't quite understand what I was looking at. That's when the figure left the darkness, so painfully slow. Creeping, not too different from the way I did when I approached the cabin after grabbing the booze. As the cool light of the night hit the body, the shape confused me more. At first I saw an arm, but it was dark and misshapen. The fingers weren't that long, the legs themselves appeared crouched, yet the figure was tall. As it stepped fully into view, I saw that the misshapen parts of its body were merely clumps of hair that seemed to stand among its already hairy form. The fingers weren't long for its size, but its claws made up for it. The eyes lost their red tinge, becoming black beads that caught the light, but even the darkness seemed to dim that glint. It was a monster, a wolf-like creature standing on its back legs, its body an ugly, demonic mix between man and dog. Yet, its face was that of a hound with white teeth, gnarled, as I could see a few poking out from beneath its black lips. As it approached, it must have seen me. It must have seen me see it.
Why else did it walk so slowly?
Yet why did its eyes follow mine? Maybe it knew I saw it and just didn't care. It knew that there wouldn't be any interruptions this time. It knew I was alone. If it could smile cruelly, I felt it did just before it dropped to all fours and ran towards the cabin. I was helpless. Despite my size, despite my strength, I couldn't do anything. I saw the glass shatter as if it weren't really there. A window to me, a bothersome cobweb to it. Darkness filled my vision, and in that darkness its eyes became like fire once again. I saw teeth. I felt claws dig into my skin. I remember grabbing a bed frame. I felt teeth sink into my left leg. It hurt, but I felt true pain when the teeth reached my bone and I could feel the crunch, the grating of bone on bone. I was screaming all the time, but I knew that help wouldn't reach me in that second. The creature tried to pull me out the window. It got my leg hung over the window. It started to tug at my leg. I heard nothing but ringing and my heart pounding. I dropped to the floor of the cabin, but I didn't feel it. I stared at the broken window and the wet blood gleaming on the windowsill. I raised my eyes to look at the sky and then I passed out. I woke up in an ambulance. I think the sun was up. A beam of light gleamed through the windshield and straight into my eyes. With the light in my eyes, everything looked dark, highlighted with gold. "He's awake," a guy behind me said. "Thank God," the driver said. "I will let Aurora know." "Hey kid, how are you feeling?" the man behind me asked. Before I could answer, he continued speaking. "If you feel a little weird right now, that's just the drugs taking effect. If you want to rest, you can. I didn't have much choice. I could feel my eyes roll back and then my head drop. I was out again. The next time I woke up was 2 days later, post-surgery. I woke up with family around me. There is a certain kind of sadness that still tears me up inside when people look at me, yet it doesn't hurt as much as the expressions my family wore as they sat by my hospital bed. My father especially. My leg had been amputated, at least partially. A lot of it was already missing, according to my family. The doctor explained the rest to me alone. I will spare you gory details, but tried to save as much as they could in surgery. But it wasn't going to happen. Looking down at my left leg was surreal. I just couldn't believe it. Maybe my mind was just preoccupied with something else. I received flowers from Sally, but she never showed up. Turned out my bad feelings about her were founded. She just felt guilty enough to make an empty gesture. When Clint told me that little bit of news, it was like a drop in the ocean. I told him to forget it when he suggested a little revenge. I just didn't care. And sure, losing my leg was life-changing. I didn't get my football scholarship gone, but the university I was speaking to did give us a sort of half-scholarship thing. It meant I needed better grades, and my parents had to pay more than they would, but still less than the full price. I will never know what I could have become. What I am now is nothing more than a glorified manager at a car dealership. I spend most of my days at a desk, just getting on with life. And it's not bad, but like said, I get those looks. And those who knew me can't help but look a certain way when they see me. Even as I look at my leg now, my thoughts aren't filled with what could have been, even though there is plenty of that at times. All I think about is that creature, that man-dog thing. It changed everything inside my head. It ruined my life, the life I could have, but it also broke something inside me. It took something inside of me, because I hear it. I hear it every time I am close to falling asleep. My heart aches with fear. I feel powerless all over again. I know it isn't in my city, let alone outside my window, but I still check every single night. It was supposed to be a celebration, the end of an exhausting journey through medical school, a coming-of-age ritual that I, Damiano, and my friends always had. Camping in the mountains, a sacred tradition for us nature lovers, but Renata, my girlfriend, didn't see it that way. "We could do something different this time," she said, rolling her eyes. She was already a doctor, and for her, our tradition was nonsense. I met Renata at a party through Yara, her best friend and my classmate. With her curly brown hair and bright eyes, she was the most beautiful girl there, and I fell in love at first sight. I already had everything planned, a marriage proposal after my graduation a year from now. She hates nature. It's our only point of contention, but I can't complain. She always goes out of her way for me. As we drove to the campsite, I tried to calm her down. "Honey, we'll do something different next time, I promise." I knew she was afraid of camping, but she was getting better. "Whatever you want," she murmured, laughing. "Damiano, you say that every time. Do you think they've arrived yet?" I decided to call Richard. The phone rang, but no one answered. Strange, they're not picking up. Try Yara, Renata suggested. I tried and she didn't answer either. I took Renata's phone to try again and saw a strange message from Yara. Don't come. What, Renata, what is this? I showed her the phone. She quickly averted her gaze from the road to read it. Don't come? They must be trying to be funny. Richard and Yara sometimes like to play pranks on us, honey, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't go, I said, feeling a chill. They're just being funny, Damiano. Relax. She was strangely calm about the situation, which scared me a little, as she was usually so easily spooked. We arrived at the campsite. Richard and Yara's car was there, but there was no sign of them. Richard, Yara? I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. Suddenly, they emerged from the woods, smiling. But there was something wrong. Richard's smile seemed forced, almost fixed. And Yara's eyes had an empty glint I'd never seen before. You took your time, Richard said, his voice a little more monotone than usual. We got your message, Renata said, handing the phone back to me. You two are such jokers. Yara laughed, a shrill, joyless sound. Message? What message? My heart froze. Renata looked at me, her expression finally a mix of confusion and dread. The don't come message, she explained, her voice uncertain. Richard and Yara exchanged glances, then turned their gazes back to us with a disturbing silence. We don't know what you're talking about, Richard said, his smile still oddly fixed. Renata frowned. No, you do, I saw it. From your phone, Yara. This is my phone, Yara said, pulling out a cell phone from her pocket. It wasn't the same number that sent the message to Renata. Where did you get that message? A shiver ran down my spine. Renata's calm demeanor shattered. Her eyes widened. I don't understand. It was from your number, Yara. I'm sure of it. Richard and Yara just watched us, their smiles unmoving, their eyes empty. It was as if they were scanning us, evaluating every reaction. The air grew heavy, cold. Even with the campfire Richard had already lit. When did he do that? Damiano, I have a strange feeling. Renata whispered, grabbing my arm. Her skin was cold. How about a toast to our graduation? Richard said, raising a water bottle. To our new life. Life, Yara echoed, her voice strangely high-pitched. Yes, a new life. I looked at Renata. She was pale, her eyes fixed on Richard and Yara. It wasn't them. It couldn't be them. The way they moved, the way they spoke, it was as if they were slightly distorted versions, imperfect copies. As night fell, the atmosphere became unbearable. Richard and Yara talked about trivialities, but their eyes never left us. They seemed to be studying our every move, every breath. Every time I picked up my phone to try and call someone, they'd interrupt me with some random question or a suggestion to go explore the forest. How about a walk, Damiano? Yara suggested, her smile widening on her pale face. Just a little bit before bed. Renata squeezed my hand. No, her voice was firm. We're tired. Let's sleep. Richard stood up, his movements fluid, almost unnatural. As you wish. He and Yara set up their tents in silence, a greater distance than usual. Inside the tent, Renata was trembling. It's not them, Damiano, she whispered, her voice choked. It's not really them. What happened to them? I don't know, honey. But we're getting out of here at dawn, I said, trying to sound brave. When I fell asleep, I had nightmares. I dreamt of Richard and Yara's empty eyes and the don't come message flashing in my mind. I was woken by a sound. A low whisper, like dry leaves rustling on the ground coming from outside the tent. I looked to my side. Renata wasn't there. My heart pounded. I unzipped the tent and crawled out, the night air embracing me with a biting cold. Richard and Yara's tents were empty. The campfire had turned to embers, its weak warmth fading into the darkness. Renata, I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer. Then I heard it. A sound coming from the dense forest. A strange murmur, almost a chant, but without words. It was Renata's voice. I ran towards the sound, entering the darkness of the woods. The trees closed in around me, their branches like skeletal fingers pointing at something sinister. Renata's voice grew clearer, but it wasn't a cry for help. It was a soft, repetitive lament, as if she were reciting something. I burst through a clearing and froze. Renata was there. Her back to me, standing in front of a dark, jagged rock formation I hadn't noticed before. She was swaying gently from side to side. And then I saw them. Richard and Yara were kneeling in front of her in a strange reverence, their bodies motionless, their faces turned upward. as if worshipping her. They weren't the same. Their eyes glowed with a faint greenish light, almost bioluminescent, and the skin on their faces seemed stretched, translucent, revealing dark veins pulsing beneath. Renata slowly raised her arms, and a sound that was not human escaped her throat. It was the melody I had been hearing, now louder, more filling, an ancient and terrifying language. The air around them vibrated, and then I noticed Renata's eyes. They weren't the bright brown I loved. They were just like Richard and Yara's, green, empty, and filled with a darkness that could never be filled. She turned, slowly and deliberately. Her smile was that of a predator, her lips thin and stretched, showing teeth that seemed longer, sharper. "Don't come, Damiano," she said, her voice no longer the one I knew, but a distorted echo of the melody that filled the air. We're home now. My feet were rooted to the ground, unable to move. What was my girlfriend was now something terrifyingly different, something that looked at me with an ancient hunger. Renata's green eyes glowed intensely in the darkness, and the murmuring of the forest became a chorus of voices, all repeating the same phrase, "Don't come, don't come, don't come." And I knew with a terrifying certainty that I was next. I never should have come on this stupid camping trip. That's what I kept telling myself as I huddled in the damp darkness, straining my ears for any sound that might give away the presence of what? I didn't even know anymore. All I knew was that something was out there in the endless sea of pines, something that had already taken Eric's dad. And now it was hunting us, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start at the beginning, back when this was just supposed to be a fun weekend getaway with my friends. God, was that really only 2 days ago? It feels like a lifetime. My name's Charlie, and I'm in 8th grade at Millbrook Middle School. Just your average 13-year-old kid, I guess. Not particularly athletic or popular, but I've got a solid group of friends. That's who I was with when everything went to hell. Eric, Peter, Jason, and Robert. Eric had been going on and on about this camping trip for weeks. His dad, Mr. Larson, was some kind of outdoorsman and had promised to take Eric and a few friends deep into the Adirondacks for a real wilderness experience. No cell phones, no iPads, just good old-fashioned camping. Eric was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. "Come on, Charlie, it'll be awesome," he'd said, grinning from ear to ear. "My dad's going to teach us how to track animals, build shelters, all that survival stuff." I'd been hesitant at first. The thought of being out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by who knows what, didn't exactly fill me with enthusiasm. But peer pressure is a hell of a thing, and eventually I caved. So there we were, piled into Mr. Larson's massive SUV early on a crisp Friday morning in October. The leaves were just starting to turn, painting the world in a riot of reds and golds. It should have been beautiful. Instead, as we drove deeper and deeper into the wilderness, leaving civilization far behind, I felt a growing sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. I glanced around at my friends, wondering if any of them felt the same. Eric, of course, was practically vibrating with excitement, his mop of blonde hair bouncing as he pointed out landmarks to his dad. He'd always been the adventurous one of our group, always pushing us to try new things, take risks. Sometimes it led to amazing experiences. Other times, well, let's just say Eric's ideas didn't always pan out. Next to Eric sat Peter, his nose buried in a thick paperback. Classic Peter. While the rest of us were busy with sports or video games, Peter devoured books like they were going out of style. He pushed his glasses up his nose and flipped another page, completely oblivious to the world around him. In the back row with me were Jason and Robert. Jason was sound asleep, his bulky frame taking up more than his fair share of the seat. The gentle giant of our group, Jason was the kind of guy who could bench press a small car but wouldn't hurt a fly. His snores filled the car, providing an oddly comforting background noise. Robert, on the other hand, was wide awake, his dark eyes darting nervously from window to window. Out of all of us, Robert was the one I was most surprised to see on this trip. He wasn't exactly the outdoorsy type, more of a computer geek, really, always talking about coding and AI and stuff I barely understood. But here he was, clutching his backpack like a lifeline. "You okay, Rob?" I whispered, not wanting to wake Jason or interrupt Mr. Larson's running commentary on the local flora and fauna. Robert jumped slightly, then gave me a weak smile. "Yeah, just Not used to all this nature, you know? It's so big. I nodded, understanding completely. The farther we drove, the smaller I felt, like we were being swallowed up by the vast, indifferent wilderness. After what felt like hours, Mr. Larson finally pulled off onto a barely visible dirt road. We bounced and jolted along for another 20 minutes before he brought the car to a stop in a small clearing. "All right, boys," he boomed, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "This is where our real adventure begins. Grab your packs, we've got about a 5-mile hike to our campsite." 5 miles? Through this dense forest? I exchanged a worried glance with Robert, but there was no backing out now. We piled out of the car, shouldering our heavy backpacks. Mr. Larson led the way, machete in hand to clear any obstacles, with Eric right on his heels. The rest of us fell into line behind them, with me bringing up the rear. As we hiked, the forest seemed to close in around us. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining overhead to block out most of the sunlight. The air grew cooler, damper. Strange bird calls echoed in the distance, unlike anything I'd ever heard before. But it wasn't until we were about halfway to the campsite that I first noticed something was off. It was subtle at first, just a feeling of being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something lurking in the shadows between the trees. But there was never anything there. Just more trees, stretching endlessly in every direction. Then I started to notice the silence. It fell suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch. One moment, the forest was alive with the sounds of birds and small animals. The next, nothing. Just the crunch of our boots on the leaf-strewn ground and our labored breathing. I wasn't the only one who noticed. I saw Robert's head swiveling back and forth, his eyes wide with fear. Even Jason, usually so laid back, seemed on edge. "Hey, Mr. Larson," Peter called out, his voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Is it normal for the forest to get this quiet?" Mr. Larson paused, frowning slightly. "Well, sometimes animals will go quiet if there's a predator in the area. Bear maybe, or a mountain lion. Nothing to worry about, boys. They're more afraid of us than we are of them." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they had the opposite effect on me. A bear? A mountain lion? How was that supposed to make us feel better? We pressed on, the silence growing heavier with each step. And then, just as the last of the daylight was fading, we heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold and my heart leap into my throat. It was a scream. High-pitched, agonized, and very, very human. Mr. Larson froze, his hand flying up in a gesture for us to stop. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, more to himself than to us. "Dad?" Eric's voice was small, scared. I'd never heard him sound like that before. "Dad, what do we do?" For a long moment, Mr. Larson didn't move. Then he seemed to shake himself, turning to face us with a forced smile. "It's probably nothing, boys. Maybe some animal that sounds like a person. But just to be safe, we're going to set up camp right here for the night. Okay?" We nodded mutely, too scared to argue. As we started to unpack our gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were making a terrible mistake. We should have turned back, should have run as fast as we could back to the car and civilization. But we didn't. And as the night closed in around us, bringing with it a chorus of unnatural sounds and fleeting shadows just beyond the reach of our flashlights, I realized with growing horror that it might already be too late. We set up camp in a small clearing, our tents forming a tight circle around the fire pit Mr. Larson insisted on building. "Fire keeps the animals away," he said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had made that scream wasn't afraid of a little campfire. As the flames flickered to life, casting long shadows across our faces, I studied my friends. Eric was trying to put on a brave face, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Peter had his nose in his book again, but he wasn't turning any pages. Jason sat on a log, his massive frame hunched over, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. And Robert? Robert was muttering to himself, fingers flying over the screen of a small device he'd pulled from his pocket. "Hey!" Mr. Larson's sharp voice made us all jump. "I thought I said no electronics, Robert." "Hand it over." Robert clutched the device to his chest, his eyes wide. "But Mr. Larson, no buts. This is about experiencing nature, remember? Now give it here." Reluctantly, Robert surrendered the gadget. Mr. Larson pocketed it with a satisfied nod. "All right, boys. Who wants to learn how to roast the perfect marshmallow?" But none of us were in the mood for campfire treats. The forest around us seemed alive with whispers and movement, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. Mr. Larson, I finally worked up the courage to ask, what if that scream wasn't an animal? Shouldn't we try to help? He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Look, Charlie, I know you're scared. All of you are, but trust me, there's nothing out there that we need to worry about. Probably just a fox or something. Now let's try to get some sleep, okay? Things will look better in the morning. But sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake in my tent shared with Robert, listening to the sounds of the forest. Robert's whispers broke the silence. Charlie, you awake? I rolled over to face him. Yeah, can't sleep either. He shook his head, his face pale in the dim light of the moon filtering through the tent fabric. There's something wrong here, Charlie. Really wrong. I've been tracking it. Tracking what? I asked, my heart beginning to race. The anomalies. The electromagnetic disturbances. They're off the charts out here. That's what my device was for before Mr. Larson took it. Charlie, I don't think we're dealing with animals. I think there's something else out here. Something not natural. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell Robert he was being paranoid, but deep down I knew he was right. There was something fundamentally wrong about these woods, something that set every nerve on edge. A sudden scream pierced the night, much closer this time. We bolted upright, our eyes wide with terror. It was followed by the sound of running feet, branches snapping, and then silence. Boys, everything okay in there? Mr. Larson's voice came from outside, tense and alert. Before we could answer, another scream split the air. This time I recognized the voice. It was Eric. What happened next was a blur of confusion and terror. We burst out of our tents to find Eric's empty, a trail of disturbed undergrowth leading into the dark forest. Mr. Larson was already charging down the path, flashlight in one hand, hunting knife in the other. Eric! Eric, answer me! He shouted, his voice cracking with fear. We followed, stumbling through the darkness, branches whipping at our faces. The beam of Mr. Larson's flashlight danced crazily ahead of us, illuminating snippets of the forest. A gnarled root here, a flash of leaves there, and then suddenly, the light fell on Eric. He was standing in a small clearing, his back to us, completely motionless. Eric! Thank God, Mr. Larson breathed, rushing forward. Are you okay? What happened? Eric didn't respond, didn't move. As we got closer, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was very, very wrong. Eric? I called out, my voice shaking. Eric, come on, man. You're scaring us. Slowly, so slowly, Eric began to turn, and as his face came into view, illuminated by the harsh beam of the flashlight, I heard someone, maybe me, maybe all of us, let out a terrified scream. It wasn't Eric. Not anymore. The thing that faced us wore Eric's clothes, had Eric's blonde hair. But the face was wrong, distorted. The eyes were too large, the mouth a gaping maw filled with needle-sharp teeth. And the skin, it seemed to ripple and shift as if something was moving beneath it. Run, Mr. Larson whispered, his voice choked with horror. Run! We turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush, blind with terror. Behind us I could hear something pursuing. Not footsteps, but a wet, slithering sound that seemed to come from all around us. I don't know how long we ran. Time lost all meaning in that nightmarish flight through the dark forest. All I knew was the burning in my lungs, the sting of branches against my skin, and the overwhelming need to get away. Finally, gasping for air, we burst into another clearing. This one was different. In the center stood a massive, ancient tree, its gnarled branches reaching towards the star-filled sky like grasping fingers. At its base was a dark opening, a cave or a hollow in the trunk, I couldn't tell. In there, Mr. Larson panted, gesturing towards the opening. Quick, before it catches up. We didn't hesitate. One by one, we squeezed through the narrow opening, finding ourselves in a spacious hollow within the tree. It was pitch black inside, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Is everyone here? Mr. Larson whispered, his voice tight with fear. Sound off. Here, I gasped. Present, came Peter's shaky voice. Yeah, stammered Robert. A grunt from Jason confirmed his presence, 5 of us. We'd lost Eric, but the rest of us had made it. For now. Outside we could hear something moving, circling, waiting. Mr. Larson, Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. What was that thing? In the darkness I heard Mr. Larson take a deep, shuddering breath. I don't know, son. I've never seen anything like it. But I swear I'm going to get you boys out of here. Somehow. As we huddled together in the hollow of that ancient tree, surrounded by the sounds of something inhuman prowling just outside, I realized that our ordeal was far from over. Whatever that thing was, whatever had taken Eric, it wasn't going to give up easily. And as the long night wore on, I began to wonder, was it just Eric it had taken? Or was it possible that none of us were who we thought we were anymore? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I pressed myself further into the damp earth of our hiding place, straining my ears for any sound that might give away the creature's location. But all I could hear was the ragged breathing of my friends and the wild pounding of my own heart. What had started as a simple camping trip had become a nightmare beyond imagination. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible thought began to form. What if we never made it out of these woods? As the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the cracks in our wooden sanctuary, I realized that our fight for survival was only just beginning. The pale light of dawn brought little comfort. We'd spent the night huddled in that hollowed-out tree, jumping at every sound, every whisper of wind through the leaves. None of us had slept. How could we after what we'd seen? "All right, boys," Mr. Larson whispered, his voice hoarse. "We need to make a plan. We can't stay here forever." "But what about that thing?" Peter asked, pushing his glasses up his nose with a trembling hand. "It's still out there, isn't it?" Mr. Larson's silence was answer enough. I could see the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, aging him years in a single night. He was supposed to protect us, to keep us safe. But how could anyone be prepared for something like this? "We need to get back to the car," he finally said. "It's our only chance of getting out of here and finding help for Eric." His voice caught on his son's name, and I saw a flash of raw pain cross his face before he composed himself. "But we don't even know where we are," Jason pointed out, his usual confidence replaced by fear. "We ran for who knows how long last night. We could be miles from our campsite." I might be able to help with that," Robert said hesitantly. We all turned to look at him. "Remember that device Mr. Larson confiscated? It wasn't just for tracking anomalies. It also has GPS." Mr. Larson's eyes widened. He quickly dug into his pocket, pulling out Robert's device. "Can you use this to get us back to the car?" Robert nodded, taking the device with reverent care. "I think so. It'll take me a few minutes to boot it up and get a signal, but..." A blood-curdling shriek cut through the morning air, so close it seemed to vibrate through the very wood around us. We froze, hardly daring to breathe. "It's found us," I whispered, terror clawing at my throat. Mr. Larson's face set in grim determination. "Okay, change of plans. Robert, you work on getting that GPS going. The rest of us are going to make a run for it. We'll try to draw it away, give Robert some time. Once you've got our location, try to make your way back to the car. If we're not there, just go. Get help." "But Mr. Larson," I started to protest. "No arguments, Charlie. It's our best chance." He turned to Robert. "You think you can do this, son?" Robert gulped but nodded, his fingers already dancing over the device's screen. "Good man. All right, boys. On my mark, we run. Robert, you stay here until it's clear, understood?" We nodded, our hearts pounding in our chests. Mr. Larson peered out of the hollow, then held up 3 fingers. 2, 1. Now, we burst out of the tree, sprinting in the opposite direction from where we'd heard the cry. I could hear it behind us almost immediately, that wet, slithering sound that haunted my nightmares. But we didn't look back. We couldn't. We ran until our lungs burned, weaving between trees, leaping over fallen logs. Mr. Larson led the way, his longer strides keeping him just ahead of us, and then, without warning, he wasn't. One moment he was there, crashing through the underbrush. The next he was gone, as if the forest had swallowed him whole. "Mr. Larson," Peter cried out, skidding to a halt. We stopped, spinning around wildly, searching for any sign of him. There was nothing. No sound, no movement, just the eerie stillness of the forest. "We have to go back," Jason said, his voice shaking. "We can't just leave him." But even as he spoke, we heard it. That terrible, inhuman shriek coming from the direction Mr. Larson had vanished. It was answered by another cry, this one undoubtedly human, a scream of pure agony that cut off abruptly, leaving behind a silence more terrifying than any sound. "Oh God," Peter whimpered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," and I felt like I was going to be sick. Mr. Larson was gone. Just like Eric, taken by whatever ungodly thing lurked in these woods, and we were alone. We "We need to get back to Robert," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant in my own ears. "We need to get out of here." The others nodded mutely, too shocked and scared to argue. We turned and began to make our way back the way we'd come, moving as quietly as we could. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of adrenaline through our systems. When we finally reached the hollow tree, we found Robert waiting for us, his face pale with fear. "I heard the screams," he whispered. "Mr. Larson?" I shook my head, unable to form the words. Robert's face crumpled, but he took a deep breath and held up his device. "I've got our location," he said. "The car's about 3 miles northeast of here. But guys, there's something else you need to see." He turned the screen towards us. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was looking at, a mess of lines and colors like some abstract painting. But then I realized what it was, a topographical map of the area. And there, right where we were standing, was a swirling vortex of energy readings pulsing like a malevolent heart. "What is that?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert's eyes were wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not natural. And I think it might be what's behind everything that's happening here." As we stared at the pulsing anomaly on the screen, a chilling realization swept over me. We weren't just lost in the woods. We were trapped in the heart of something ancient and evil, something that had already taken 2 of our number. And as another inhuman howl echoed through the forest, closer this time, I knew with terrifying certainty that it wouldn't stop until it had all of us. "We need to move," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Now." As we gathered what little supplies we had and prepared to make our desperate bid for escape, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. Some piece of the puzzle that would explain why we were here, why this was happening to us. But there was no time to dwell on it. We had to run, had to fight, had to survive. Because if we didn't make it out of these woods, no one would ever know the horror that lurked within them. And so, with heavy hearts and terror nipping at our heels, we set out into the forest once more, praying that we would live to see another dawn. We moved through the forest like ghosts, our feet barely making a sound on the leaf-strewn ground. Robert led the way, his eyes glued to the device in his hands, guiding us towards what we hoped was salvation. But with each step, the feeling of wrongness grew stronger, a palpable miasma that seemed to cling to our skin. "Wait," Peter suddenly whispered, grabbing my arm. "Do you hear that?" We all froze, straining our ears. At first, I heard nothing but the usual forest sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. But then underneath it all, I caught it, a low pulsing hum just on the edge of hearing. "It's getting stronger," Robert muttered, tapping at his device. "The energy readings are off the charts. We're getting close to something." "The car?" Jason asked hopefully. Robert shook his head. "No, this is different. I've never seen readings like this before." As if in response to his words, the forest around us began to change. The trees seemed to twist, their bark rippling like water. The ground beneath our feet softened, becoming spongy and unstable. And the air filled with whispers, countless voices speaking in languages I'd never heard before. "Guys," I said, my voice shaking, "I think we should turn back." But even as the words left my mouth, I realized it was too late. The forest behind us had changed, becoming an impenetrable wall of writhing vegetation. We had no choice but to press forward. As we stumbled onward, the world around us continued to warp and shift. Colors bled into one another, creating impossible hues that hurt to look at. The ground rose and fell in nauseating waves, and always that maddening whisper in the air, growing louder with each step. Finally, we emerged into a clearing unlike anything I'd ever seen. In the center stood a massive structure, a twisted amalgamation of metal and organic matter. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, tendrils of energy arcing out to touch the trees surrounding it. What is that thing?" Jason breathed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Robert was furiously tapping at his device, his face pale. It's not from here. Not from Earth, these readings. They're completely alien." As we stood there trying to process what we were seeing, a figure emerged from behind the structure. My heart leapt into my throat. It was Eric's dad, Mr. Larson, but something was wrong. He moved with an unnatural fluidity, his joints bending in ways they shouldn't, and his eyes were completely black, reflecting the pulsing light of the alien structure. "Mr. Larson?" Peter called out hesitantly. Are you okay? Mr. Larson's head snapped towards us, a smile spreading across his face that was too wide, too full of teeth. When he spoke, his voice was layered with others as if 1,000 beings were speaking through him at once. Okay? Oh, I'm more than okay. I'm perfect. We're perfect. And soon you will be too. We? I managed to choke out. Mr. Larson's grin widened impossibly further. Oh yes, we. You see, boys, we've been waiting for you. For so long we've been trapped here in this little pocket of reality. But now, thanks to you, we can finally break free. As he spoke, more figures emerged from the shadows. Eric, the park ranger we'd seen at the trailhead, other hikers we didn't recognize, all moving with that same unnatural grace, all with those terrible black eyes. You were our beacons, not Mr. Larson continued. Your fear, your confusion, your very humanity, it all served to weaken the barriers holding us here. And now we're ready to spread across your world. The truth hit me like a physical blow. We hadn't stumbled upon this horror by accident. We'd been lured here, chosen. Why us? Robert asked, his scientific curiosity somehow overriding his terror. Why children, not Mr. Larson laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Children are so wonderfully malleable, so full of potential, the perfect vessels for our kind. And you five, oh, you five are special. You each carry a spark of something unique, something we need. He pointed at each of us in turn. The adventurer, the scholar, the protector, the visionary, and you, his black eyes locked onto mine, the survivor. Together you'll be the key to our expansion. Our invasion force? We'll never help you, Jason growled, stepping protectively in front of us. Oh, but you will, not Mr. Larson purred. You don't have a choice. In fact, it's already begun. Haven't you noticed? With dawning horror, I looked down at my hands. My skin was rippling, just like the bark of the trees had been. I could feel something moving beneath it, something trying to get out. No, I whispered. No, this can't be happening, but it was. I could feel my thoughts changing, alien concepts and memories flooding my mind. I looked at my friends and saw the same terror and confusion on their faces. We were changing. We were becoming them. As the alien presence clawed its way into my mind, one last, desperate thought managed to break through. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Somehow, some way, we had to fight this. We had to warn the world. But even as I clung to that final shred of humanity, I felt it slipping away, replaced by something vast and unknowable. And as the clearing filled with inhuman laughter, I realized that our camping trip had been more than just a nightmare. It was the beginning of the end of the world. As the alien presence invaded my mind, I felt myself slipping away. Memories, hopes, fears, all of it was being consumed by this otherworldly intelligence. But deep down in a place I didn't even know existed, a spark of defiance ignited. No, this is my body, my mind, my life. I don't know where the strength came from, but suddenly I was fighting back. I visualized walls in my mind, barriers against the invading consciousness. It wasn't easy. It felt like trying to hold back an ocean with my bare hands, but slowly, inch by inch, I began to reclaim myself. Charlie? I heard Robert's voice, distant and distorted. Charlie, what's happening to you? I opened my eyes, not realizing I had closed them. The clearing swam into focus. My friends were on their knees, their bodies twisting and changing as the alien presence took hold. But they were looking at me with a mixture of awe and hope, because I was standing, unchanged, human. The thing wearing Mr. Larson's face snarled, its features contorting into something inhuman. Impossible, it hissed. You can't resist us. No one can resist us, but I had. Somehow, some way, I had found the strength to fight back. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, about humanity. You're wrong, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. We can resist. We will resist. I reached out to Jason, the closest to me. Come on, big guy. I know you're in there. Fight it! For a moment, nothing happened. Then Jason's hand twitched, reaching for mine. I grabbed it, and it was like an electric current passed between us. I could feel Jason's essence, his humanity, surging back to the surface. That's it, I encouraged, reaching for Peter with my other hand. Come on, guys. Remember who you are! One by one, my friends began to shake off the alien influence. It wasn't easy. I could see the strain on their faces, the battle raging inside them, but they were doing it. They were coming back, the not Mr. Larson let out a shriek of rage and frustration. The air around us began to vibrate, the alien structure pulsing with angry red light. "You fools," it howled. "You have no idea what you're giving up. The power, the knowledge, it could all be yours." "We don't want it," I said firmly. "Not at this price." As my friends regained control of themselves, something strange began to happen. The clearing around us started to shift and warp, like reality itself was coming undone. The alien structure flickered, becoming translucent. "No," the creature wearing Mr. Larson's face wailed. "No, you're ruining everything." I understood then. Our resistance, our humanity. It was somehow undoing whatever force had brought this thing into our world. We were closing the door it had tried to open. "Guys," I said urgently, "we need to get out of here." Now we ran. We ran like we'd never run before, crashing through the underbrush as the world fell apart around us. Trees melted into nothingness, the ground rippled like water, and all the while that unearthly howl followed us, filled with rage and despair. I don't know how long we ran, or how we found our way, but suddenly, miraculously, we burst out of the forest and onto the road where we'd parked the car. It was still there, untouched, a beacon of normalcy in a world gone mad. "Get in," I yelled, yanking open the driver's door. Thank God Mr. Larson had left the keys in the ignition. We piled in and I turned the key. For one heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life and I floored it, sending us hurtling down the road and away from the nightmare behind us. It wasn't until we'd put miles between us and those awful woods that we finally let ourselves breathe. Let ourselves think about what had happened. "Charlie," Peter said quietly, you saved us. How?" I shook my head, still not entirely sure myself. "I don't know. I couldn't let it win. I couldn't let it take us." "But Mr. Larson," Jason said, his voice breaking. "And Eric, they're still—" "We'll come back," I said firmly. "We'll get help, real help, and we'll find a way to save them." I didn't know if it was possible. I didn't know if anything would ever be the same again. But I did know one thing. We had faced the impossible, stared into the abyss of an alien horror, and we had survived. We had held on to our humanity. As the first rays of sunlight began to paint the sky, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, whatever battles we might face, we would face them together, and we would never, ever give up. Because that's what it means to be human, to fight, to hope, to survive. And as I drove us towards home, towards safety, I made a silent promise to Mr. Larson, to Eric, to everyone who had been taken by that thing in the woods. We would find a way to save them. We would find a way to stop this. Even if that meant that it cost me my own well-being. Sorry for any formatting errors, I'm on mobile. My girlfriend commandeered my laptop. I wrote a R2-sentence horror about this, and a few people asked me to expand on it. I'd mostly pushed the memories out of my mind and written them off. But once I got to thinking about it, I realized it was kind of a weird trip, and so I figured I'd share and see what you all think of it. I love camping. I try to go every summer. My family has a little cabin on Moxie Pond right on the water. It's a couple 100 miles headed northwest and then about 10 miles down the old logging roads to get to our spot. I love it. It's trees and water and no neighbors to be seen. It's quiet unless the dickhead across the pond is running his generator all damn day. There's no power. It's gas lights and stove. No plumbing, no running water other than what you pump from the lake using the old-fashioned hand pump over the sink. You do your business in the outhouse and throw some cedar shavings on it as a courtesy to the next person. My girlfriend have been together for about 2 years. She's more from the city, but she was excited to come with when I said I wanted to go up to camp this year. We couldn't go last year. So we packed our clothes and food and whatnot into my truck and started up. It's about a 4-hour drive, about an hour and a half on the highway until you get to Shawhegan. Skauvegas, it's occasionally called. And then it's another couple hours driving through tiny towns that are trapped in yesteryear and falling apart. The further you get from the paper mill, the worse it looks, but the better it smells. Driving by the paper mill smells like a wet skunk fart. You'll eventually get up into the mountains. The views are amazing. Sometimes some masshole will give you plenty of time to admire them as you're trapped behind their bumper. As they creep along, you eventually get to the Forks. The Forks contains Barry's General Store, whitewater rafting companies, and not much else. We got up there closer to the end of twilight, so there was nothing going on. No people out. You take right, drive to the dam at the end of the lake, take a left and you're on the logging roads. You have to go kind of slow on the logging roads. I almost kissed a young moose one year when it jumped out right beside my truck. Its nose almost coming through my open window. You're surrounded by nothing but trees. The forest is so thick you can't really see past the first trees, especially at night. I've had some weird things happen up here over the years. I've heard a blood-curdling scream in the middle of the night that sounded like a girl getting murdered. The next day I found a half-eaten rabbit floating in the lake. That put my mind at ease. A rabbit can scream and it'll sound just like a little girl. I've heard singing in the woods away from the direction of any other camps. It was a beautiful, mournful song, and I didn't understand the language. That's a different story, though. I digress. We're driving down the logging roads, and I'm quietly laughing to myself as my girlfriend clutches my arm tightly, her eyes wide. She occasionally punches my leg when I don't stifle myself well enough. I don't blame her for being scared. She's never been in woods like this before. But I warned her, and it was her fault we got such a late start anyway, so we have to drive in at night. Once you get closer to the lake, the trails get smaller and more overgrown. Birch trees, bent over from years of snow and wind, scrape their branches over the top of the truck, occasionally blocking my vision. There's always maintenance to be done. I'm used to my eyes playing tricks on me, so I didn't think anything of seeing the shadows moving around us. I just wrote it off as being a trick of the light as the front of my truck bounced on the wretched road. My girlfriend would occasionally gasp and whimper and say, "What the fuck is that?" as the shadows played around us. Finally, I just had her put her head in my lap, and I played with her hair as I drove, constantly telling myself that the figures and shapes I see are just trees and shadow. This isn't my first time doing this. I get a little turned around in the dark, but we get to camp okay. I let her put her head back up, and I take her in my arms and comfort her before we get out, telling her that nothing weird has ever happened up here. It's a lie, but I only have to get her out of the truck and into the camp. I grab my flashlight and get out and walk over to her door. I open it for her, grab her bag, and walk her into the camp. I get the gas going and turn the lights on, sit her down in the comfy chair, hand her her book, and go to get the rest of the stuff out of the truck. We're moved in, and I make us dinner while she reads. Safe inside, she's calmer now, but she did have me close the blinds to the double slider at the front of the camp. I was going to anyway. During the day, it's a wonderful view of the lake, but at night, the fear is always at the back of my mind that I'm going to look out them and see something standing on the porch, looking in. We eat, we enjoy the privacy and each other, and we go to bed. We stay in the camp for a couple days. There's nothing that needs doing. We read, we swim, we fuck, we take the kayaks out and visit the islands. I tried to get her to just be naked while we're alone up here, but no luck. I brought a tent, because I'd like to spend a night right out in the woods, but it's hard to convince her at first. But after a couple nights spent drinking by the fire without anything weird happening, she's more inclined to try it. As long as I bring my shotgun, which I was going to do anyway. I've never had an encounter with a bear or wolves up here, and we didn't hear any howling, but I'm not staying in the woods unarmed. It's the third or fourth night when we go out. We don't go far because I know better than to just wander off into the woods. We stay in sight of the big tree beside camp. We can't see the camp, we can't hear the water. But we find a nice flat spot in a small clearing and I put the tent up. You can probably imagine how we then spent the rest of the day. We had hot dogs and s'mores over the fire that night, and then I put the fire out and we staggered to bed. She fell asleep quickly. I didn't sleep so well. I feel like I was in and out all night, more caught in the in-between world than actually asleep. I felt her get up and saw the muted light from her hand covering the flashlight, but I couldn't react or say anything. I'm not sure I didn't dream it. She went out, and after a minute she came back in with the light off. She laid down and was out again. I still couldn't move, so again I'm not sure I didn't dream her going out. My dreams are generally this not exciting, but I know I woke up when I heard her voice from outside the tent, her face on the other side of the fabric. A desperate and terrified whisper, "You need to get out of there, that's not me." "Get out, we need to get back inside the camp." My blood ran cold and my eyes opened. At least I think they were open, I couldn't see a thing. I sat up and went to reach for my shotgun just in case, but I felt her hands wrap around me and gently pull me back down. She whispered, "Where are you going?" And I just froze. I let her pull me back down as my mind raced. My thoughts were like a broken mirror tumbling around in a dryer, smashing into each other and splintering even more. I said nothing, I just laid down and listened. My girlfriend still had her hands lightly across my chest, and she seemed to have fallen asleep again. I laid there in the dark, straining to hear anything other than her breathing. There was nothing. I had to chalk it up to dreaming, but I also had to look before I could go to sleep. I started to get up again, but again she pulled me down and got on top of me, aggressively kissing me. She didn't go to bed naked. She always wears pajamas. She wore some light blue pajama pants and one of my shirts to bed. But they're gone now, though. I wear nothing to bed, so it was easy for her to get what she was after. It's exceedingly rare for her to initiate. That's almost always been my job. She's always an eager participant, but I think this was maybe the third time in 2 years that she initiated herself. And she put herself on top, and she was aggressive. I'm not complaining about not having to do the work or the enthusiasm, but all three together is like finding a unicorn. A fucking unicorn. As she did her thing, I eventually put what happened out of my mind and finally got my head in the game, thanking the alcohol. After we finished, she immediately got up and went outside. I figured she just had to pee, but she didn't bring a light. She never just gets up right after. We always just lay there for a while. She left the flap open, I'm sure, because she was coming right back. I noticed I couldn't hear anything at all. Not that I was trying to hear her piss, I just figured that she wouldn't be concerned about it and go too far from the tent in the dark. After a couple minutes, I heard her footsteps returning. She came through the flap and was already on her way to laying down before her feet were inside. I followed the sound and caught her in my arms. She was dressed again. I was going to ask her why she left her clothes outside, but she was asleep by the time her head hit my chest. I kissed her forehead and rolled her off of me so I could zip up the tent flap. Then I laid down, absolutely exhausted, and at some point I fell asleep while listening to the absolutely nothing going on in the woods around us. I thought it strange, but I just figured it was because we were out here. The next morning I made pancakes and bacon over the fire for us. I mentioned the happenings last night and she just looked at me quizzically. She couldn't remember any of it. She only remembered waking up to pee, taking the light, and then just going back to the tent and crashing again. She's not superstitious, so she just blamed the alcohol and was happy that she made me happy, and that was that. After breakfast, I started to break down the camp. I packed up some things for her to take back, pointed out the tree by camp, and sent her on her way. I watched her walk away for a minute, because I just enjoy watching my girlfriend walking away. She disappeared into the woods, and I set about breaking the tent down and getting it packed up. It went slower than I would have liked. You have to get everything just right if it's going to fit in its respective bags again. After struggling for a bit and scratching my head, I became aware that I wasn't alone. I turned around and there was my girlfriend, just looking at me. In broad daylight, she was naked again. My eyes lit up and she giggled at my face, then crossed the distance to me without a word. She used the rolled-up tent to kneel on for about 20 minutes, then just got up and walked off in the direction of camp. I'll admit, I was starting to have a hard time keeping up with her. Not that I was complaining, but I was feeling exhausted after every time. I finally got everything put away and went back to camp. I sat down and read for a little while before finally succumbing to a nap, sitting in the comfy chair in the sunlight, facing out the sliders. I woke up to my girlfriend getting touchy, after me again. When we were done, I immediately passed out. I woke up sometime in the mid-afternoon to wind and rain. I'm not sure when, we don't have a clock at camp. My girlfriend had moved to the couch reading. She was in just her underwear. I didn't know what prompted this change in dress code and appetite. I thought it was weird, but I was also happy about it. I started picking things up as we were leaving the next morning. I went in the bedroom to gather any clothes. Her blue pajama pants and my shirt weren't anywhere to be seen. I asked about them and she said they were already packed. I went outside to take a leak. The winds were getting stronger now and occasional fat raindrops would slap against my body. I could just barely hear my girlfriend calling my name, so I shook it off and went back inside to find out what she wanted. She was still sitting on the couch, reading. I asked if she was calling for me. She just looked up and shook her head. I reminded myself that sometimes my imagination gets the better of me, and just put it out of my mind. That night, she didn't let me go right to sleep. But I crashed hard after. I woke up with a mild headache early in the morning. I had to pee again. I turned on my flashlight and covered it, leaving just a sliver of light. My girlfriend sat up and looked at me, so I turned the light towards her. Her eyes looked white and cloudy. I uncovered the light and she blinked from the brightness and her eyes were back to normal. She cursed me for blasting her in the face with the light and I apologized. I told her what I was doing and to just go back to sleep. She told me to hurry back. The storm had passed. I walked outside to the tree line. I shined the light through the trees while I relieved myself just in case. The beam fell upon a patch of upset earth, all scratched and dug up. It wasn't far into the woods, so I walked over to it. Something had obviously gotten eaten. There was blood everywhere. I couldn't really make out any tracks, it just looked like there was a lot of thrashing and kicking involved. But it was weird that there wasn't a carcass. And it was weird it had happened so close to camp. If the body had been dragged off into the woods, I wasn't going to go looking for it. The next morning we got ready to go and headed out. We talked about the weekend, but she seemed to have a spotty memory of it. I didn't think she had that much to drink. She kept herself entertained with me for most of the ride home. She'd never done that before, even when I asked for it. I was finally starting to think with the head attached to my shoulders. Her personality was different, at least when it came to sex. But aside from that, she still acted like she always had. I wasn't sure what to think. All she would say when I'd ask why she wasn't nearly as inhibited anymore was I got over it, delivered with a shrug and a smile. It's been a few months now and her appetite is still high. I'm having a harder and harder time keeping up with her. I'm just getting tired more often. I've noticed I'm getting white hairs and I just feel older. I'd talk to my doctor about it, but I can't afford that. I try to tell her I'm tired, but she always brings it out of me, and then I crash immediately after. And she always seems to have more and more energy. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I couldn't even write this in peace. Does anyone have any idea what's going on? All I wanted when I was a kid was to go to summer camp. Every summer I would beg my parents to send me, but they always said the same thing. It's too expensive, or it's too far away, or we can't afford to drive out there when you get homesick. I know summer camps have fallen out of popularity these days, but they were just about the coolest thing to a kid in the early 90s. Every show had a summer camp episode. There were movies with summer camps. There were even music videos on MTV about summer camps, for God's sake. I felt like I was missing out on a big part of my childhood experience by not being allowed to go. But every year I was forced to sit at home and wish, so when Mom told me she had found a summer camp for me when I was 11, I was ecstatic. Camp Moonsong was an all-girls camp about an hour from our house, and the fee for the 60-day stay was surprisingly low. Low enough to make Mom suspicious that it was some sort of front for a sweatshop or something, and she read over the paperwork very carefully with my dad. I remember just hovering outside the kitchen as they went over it, Dad not showing her level of dedication as he held paperwork in one hand and smoked with the other. They talk about not being responsible for injuries or accidents a lot in this stuff. I remember her sighing when Dad scoffed. They're just being careful, Wendy. It sounds perfect, honestly. She's been begging to go to one for years, and if we don't send her before she's 13, I think she'll miss her chance. 12 is usually the cutoff for these kinds of things. They discussed it for a while, and when they finally came and said I could go, I was overjoyed. I had my bags packed before the last week of school was even out. And on the second day of summer vacation, my mom and dad drove me to the camp for drop-off. It was beautiful, one of those camps like you see on TV. It was in the middle of the woods with a bunch of little cabins next to a lake, and I could see a boathouse, hiking trails, archery courses, and all kinds of things that I was chomping at the bit to go try. We met the head counselor at the main cabin, a smiling blonde lady named Gladys, and after some hugs and checking over my stuff, my parents headed out. And I was shown to the Sparrow cabin where I would be staying for the next 60 days. That's where I met Lauren, Sandy, Heather, and Claire, the girls who would be my cabin mates. Sandy and Heather were 12, and this was their first time at Moonsong, but not at a sleepaway camp. Lauren was 10, and she had never been to camp either, so this was a first for both of us. Claire, however, had been coming here for about 3 years, and she was the only one of us who didn't look excited. She was trying to put on a brave face in front of us, clearly not wanting to spook us, but her mood was absolutely off. Claire was also our cabin captain, so when the loudspeaker came on, welcoming us and telling us to meet at the pavilion for orientation, she led the way. The pavilion was more like a small amphitheater, a stone stage with rows of concrete seats leading up and out of it. We took a seat in a section near the stage, all of us chatting animatedly except for Claire as the other cabins assembled. Each cabin had 5 girls, and there were 6 cabins in all: sparrow, magpie, grouse, dove, hawk, and crow. They had spread out a little, giving each cabin room to gather, and as we all sat chattering, the camp counselors arrived to start the summer orientation. "Welcome, campers," said Gladys, her voice echoing off the stone benches, "and welcome to another exciting year at Camp Moonsong." There were a few other adults on the stage, and she introduced them as the activity directors. There was a counselor for swimming, canoeing, archery, hiking, nature studies, physical challenges, and arts and crafts. Gladys told us how our daily schedules would be posted on the bulletin boards outside our cabins at first light, and that each day would end with a marshmallow roast around the fire pit. "And don't forget, the fire pit is where we choose that night's sleepwalker," she said, something that brought nothing but polite claps from some of the campers. I saw more than a few of them that looked like Claire when she said it, and I realized there might be something a little strange at work here. Our first activity was archery, so Claire took us back to the cabin so we could get ready. "So what's with the sleepwalker thing?" I asked, Heather chiming in as well as Claire went to get a shirt that was a little more comfy. "It's nothing," she said, stripping out of her polo and slipping on a t-shirt. "It's just something that Camp Moonsong does. It doesn't mean anything, it's just tradition." "What do you mean?" I asked, the 4 of us falling in behind her as we headed for the range. She made a frustrated noise, rounding on us angrily. "Just don't worry about it. If you're lucky, it won't be a problem anyway. There are 30 of us. The chances are good that a few of you might never have to see it." She said the last more to herself than anything. "See what?" I asked, but she ignored me as we came to the archery course. We had archery, arts and crafts, and a trip to the lake that day, and by the time the sun set and the bonfire sprung to life, I found I had quite forgotten about the sleepwalker. We spent a while roasting and eating marshmallows, singing songs, telling spooky stories, and then I saw Gladys step close to the fire with a box that rattled slightly. Some of the girls looked at it ominously, Claire among them, but Gladys was all smiles. "Okay, campers, it's time to pick tonight's sleepwalker. You returning campers know how it works. If you reach into the box and draw the black ball, you are tonight's sleepwalker." I snorted, not quite sure why this had some of them so worried. What? Were they going to come and scare us in our cabin if one of us drew the black ball? Would we have to scare people? What was this, I wondered, because it all seemed kind of ridiculous. The box had barely gone through 5 people before a girl of about 8 got the black ball. It was clearly her first time here, because she seemed pleased but mystified as she handed Gladys the ball. Gladys asked her what her name was and then announced that Brenda was the summer's first sleepwalker. After that, we all went back to our cabins, even Brenda. And I remember sitting up a little with the other new girls and whispering about how silly it all was. Were they trying to scare us or something? "Oh, sleepwalkers," we all said as we laughed, but when Claire told us to go to sleep, she said something that took the starch out of our sheets. "Wait till tomorrow morning, then we'll see if you still think it's so funny." She was right. The bugle woke us up the next morning and we all shuffled to breakfast in the mess hall. Amidst the chomp of cereal, toast, eggs, and bacon, I heard someone sniffling loudly. It wasn't normal sniffling, like the kind you get from someone who's homesick. This was different, and I didn't have words for it yet. I do now that I've grown up a little. It's the hopeless kind of sniffling from someone who's lost something that can't get back, like a mother or a wife crying for a husband or a child. I glanced over to the crow table and saw that it was Brenda. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept at all, and the circles under her eyes looked like bruises. She wasn't eating, despite how the girls in her cabin tried to coax her, and her eyes seemed to weep constantly. The crow table was next to ours, and she seemed to be telling them in between sobs that she wanted to go home. They were trying to talk her out of it, saying that the chances were low that she would draw it again, and after a few days she would forget all about what she'd seen. I didn't know exactly what to make of it then, but I would learn. For the next week and a half, I watched as different girls drew the black ball. The ones who had been here before took it better than the new ones, and the new ones were always in tears the next day. Because of how the schedules were set up, we really didn't have a lot of interaction with the other cabins. We lived with the girls in our own cabin, but outside of meals and the fire pit, we didn't see the others during the day. Most of them stuck pretty close to their group during the periods in between activities, and none of them wanted to talk about what was going on if you asked them. Then, About a week and a half after Brenda drew the ball, Heather drew out the jet black sphere and was that night's sleepwalker. I remember the look on her face when she drew it out, the look of uncertainty and fear, and Gladys named her the sleepwalker of the night. She went back to Sparrow Cabin, seeming unsure of what to expect, and as we got ready for bed, we all watched her a little apprehensively. "So," Heather asked, "what happens now? Do I start walking or something? Do they come and get me in the night?" "Maybe they're going to make you disappear," Lauren said, and we all laughed nervously. "Just go to sleep," Claire said, and it shut us all up as we looked at her. "It won't happen till then." She slid under her blanket and slid a pillow over her head. So we all settled in, turning the lamp off and nestling down for sleep. Heather was soon snoring, as was Lauren, and I yawned as I drifted off as well. I guessed if something was going to happen, then it would happen. And before I knew it, I was dreaming about swimming and friendship bracelets and all the other things I was going to do tomorrow. I woke up in the middle of the night, filled with a need to pee worse than anything I'd ever felt. I was coming back from the latrine, almost back in bed, when I glanced at Heather and saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Heather's mouth was open in a silent "oh" of a scream. Her hands were bunched up in the covers, and she was writhing slowly on the sheets of her small bed. Her eyes were closed, shut tight like they might be locked that way, and she sucked in breath like she might be screaming in whatever dream she was having. I woke the others, showing them what was happening, and when Sandy reached over to shake her, Claire grabbed her by the wrist. "It won't do any good, and it could make it worse. You just have to let her get over it on her own." "But we can't just leave her like this. She's in pain," Sandy said. "She could be in more pain if you try to wake her up. She'll come out of this at dawn, so just let her be." We went back to bed, none of us but Claire sleeping, and when the sun came up, Heather came awake shaking like someone who's been badly startled. She looked around like something might be after her, like this might all be a dream too, and when we came to comfort her, she began to sob. Her eyes had the same dark circles that I'd seen on the other girls, and she walked to chow when the bugle sounded like a zombie. She didn't eat breakfast, and when I asked her what she'd dreamed about, Claire shot me a nasty look. "We don't talk about it. The worst thing you can do is make them relive it. But if we know what happens when you're the sleepwalker..." "If you're lucky," Claire said, talking over me as my voice rose, "you'll never find out what it is." "No," Heather said. "No, I want to talk about it." Claire got a pained look. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I know what it's like. It's not something you should have to relive." "Wait," I said, putting something together that I should have a while ago. "You knew this was going to happen and you didn't warn us. Why didn't you say something?" "Because it wouldn't have done any good," Claire said. "Knowing it's coming doesn't make it any easier. It's terrible no matter if it's the first time or the fifth. I got chosen twice last year. The knowing doesn't matter, it's terrible every time." "Do you want to know or not?" Heather said, turning to us angrily. "Because I'm only going to tell it once and then I never want to talk about it again." We said we did, and she got a faraway look as she began. "I was in the woods. It was night and everything was dark. Then I felt something watching me, something like a tiger or a bear or something. It was big, whatever it was, because when it roared, it shook all the trees around me. I started running through the woods as fast as I could. You say I was in bed, but my legs ache and my arms feel the pine needles that slashed at them. I ran and ran and ran, but it never seemed to catch me. It was always just out of sight, just out of reach, and the farther I ran, the more afraid I got. After a while, I felt like I might be going crazy. I was so scared, so absolutely terrified, and it just never ended. Then just as the sun came up, I heard it roar and I heard the trees rustle as it jumped. And I fell down as something heavy hit me. Then I woke up and you guys were standing there looking at me." She started crying then, and Claire gave her a hug as she assured her it was over and she was safe now. Needless to say, Heather decided to stay in when we saw it was our turn to hike today. She had spent a whole night in the woods and saw no reason to spend another hour looking at nature. That's how it went that summer. Every night we drew balls from the box, and every night it was some girl's turn to spend it in a state of terror. Sandy got her turn, Laura too, and even Claire had to suffer it one night, but never me. Some of the girls went twice, but I seemed to be immune to the black ball. It never chose me, and if it hadn't been for the team challenge, I would never have experienced it. Team challenge was Gladys's idea, and she was clearly pretty proud of it. It was the last week of camp. and I had almost thought I would get away without having to be the sleepwalker. We were gathering for the morning meeting after breakfast, and all of us assembled in the amphitheater. Gladys stood up there, smiling like she had a big surprise for us, and I suppose she was right. Good morning, campers. This week I have something special planned. Today we start the team challenges. 2 cabins will face each other in 3 events: archery, canoe races, and obstacle course. The winners will be immune to sleepwalking for that night. The losing cabin, however, will all have to be the sleepwalker that night. No one cheered, but we all knew the stakes. The way it shook out was that for 3 days the cabins would compete. On the 4th day, one of them would get the bye and the other 2 would face off. On the 5th day, the last 2 would go head-to-head to crown the best cabin. Saturday would be the color war and then pick up. Claire took us aside and told us we had to win this. Everyone in the cabin has been the sleepwalker at least once. Well, almost all of us, she said, looking at me with jealousy. I didn't feel good about it. Quite the contrary, I felt terrible. Heather had been the sleepwalker twice now, Sandy too, and I hadn't been picked once. I didn't want to either. I had watched them go through it, and it looked miserable. As it happened, though, I had won the best times on the obstacle course, and I was one of the better campers on the archery range. I felt we had a good chance of winning this thing, and the girls agreed as we started making a game plan. The Sparrows beat the Crows on Tuesday, and then we got the bye on Thursday. We were hopeful we could win this thing, and the incentive was on full display. The losing teams showed up to breakfast with bags under their eyes, shaking noticeably as they refused to eat. Whatever was going on, it was even worse in a group, and we prepared to win against the Hawks and take the whole contest. We had them at archery, but they smoked us at the canoe race. We were certain we could whip them on the obstacle course, but then disaster struck. As Claire came across the final leg of the course, having gone last so I could go first and give us a strong start, she slipped and fell off the beam, the race going to her opponent. The Hawks won, and we would be the sleepwalkers that night. We fought it, trying to stay up as late as we could, trying to stay up all night, but we were just so tired. By 11 we were all dozing, and by midnight we had lost the fight. I remember blinking owlishly as I watched Claire drift off fitfully, and when I opened my eyes I was in the forest. We were all in the forest, looking around as we awoke into some kind of strange shared dream. I was just trying to orient myself when I heard the roar that Heather had described, and it galvanized me in a way that nothing ever had. It was like a bear's roar mixed with something feline and something much deeper. I imagined it was what a Tyrannosaurus Rex sounded like, the scream of some extinct creature come back to life, and I started running. They were with me in the beginning, all of us neck and neck as we fled into the woods. It was always behind us, stomping through the trees like it was as tall as a redwood. It crashed, it rumbled, and as we ran for our lives, it menaced us from the darkness. Heather was the first to fall. I looked back, meaning to help her, but the darkness swirled up and took her. Her tear-streaked, terrified face was there one moment, and then suddenly she was swallowed by the gloom. Laura fell next, stumbled as she looked back at Heather, and I didn't look back to see her get gobbled up too. I kept running, kept showing my heels, and when Sandy fell too, I didn't even notice right away. I was in a state of panic, something I would later call a heightened terror response when I went to college to study psychology. It was similar to the response prey animals have when they are fleeing for their lives, the kind of thing that gets them eaten by pack hunters when another one pops up on the side while they're focused on the threat behind them. I ran and ran and ran, my legs pumping and my heart racing. I don't know when Claire fell or even if she did, but I felt the branches that reached out to slow me down and the rocks that battered my bare feet. I felt every mile that I ran, and I felt every horrifying stumble as I nearly lost my balance. I kept running for my life, and when the sun came up at long last, I didn't stop. I heard it spring, heard it come up from behind me like a tidal wave, but if it hit me, I didn't know it. I came awake like I meant to fight off an attacker, and the other girls were around me, looking as bad if not worse. We lost the color war. All of us were too tired to focus. Mom commented on the bruises under my eyes when she came to pick me up, but I just hugged her and said how glad I was to see her. I never spoke about that summer, not until I wrote my senior thesis on the difference between irrational and rational fear in adolescence. I didn't think I would ever visit those memories again. Not until today. I've been working as a psychiatrist since I graduated, helping kids get over their trauma and trying to find them some relief. Mostly it is normal stuff. Divorcing parents or concerns about school and friends. We talk about monsters in closets or stories that won't go away when they close their eyes. Typical kid stuff. But sometimes I help them tell a parent about someone who is doing something they shouldn't, so that person can go somewhere where they can't hurt them again. Those are the good days, the days I feel like I've made a difference. When the girl started telling me about the dreams, the ones she'd had after her mother said they had enrolled her in camp again, I felt myself beginning to hyperventilate. She described dreams of something big chasing her through the woods at night, about dreams that only came when she was at camp, and only when she was the sleepwalker. I didn't even feel it at first when the pen snapped in my hand. And when the girl said, her voice panicked, that I was bleeding, I looked down to see my hand had the jagged end of a pen buried in it. I told her mother that she might want to find another summer camp this year, not voicing what I actually believed so I didn't sound crazy. The mother seemed concerned. But Jenny loves Camp Moonsong. She's gone every year since she was 9. I strongly recommended she find her daughter another camp, and the two left, mollified, with a prescription refill. I had never imagined the place was still open. Never in my wildest dreams I sat in my office, trying to control the shakes as my hand throbbed like an infected tooth. I'm afraid to go to sleep tonight, something I haven't been afraid of since that first week home from camp. I'm afraid I might wake up in the woods again, fleeing from the thing that chases the sleepwalkers of Camp Moonsong. Christy, I don't know how to start this letter except to tell you the awful truth. Our sons are dead. I am sitting here alone in the mountain cabin you rented for us, drenched in blood. My hand is shaky and I feel pain in my soul. Our children died by my hand, I have to admit this to you. And once you read this letter fully, you will understand why I had no choice. Someday you may even find it in your heart to forgive me. But I'm not asking for that right now. Instead, I want you to please read this with an open mind. I know that what I will tell you is going to seem unbelievable, but I swear on my life, on my soul, this is precisely what happened. It may be my last chance to get the facts straight, so I beg of you to read it all the way through, and then come to your own conclusions. If not for me, then for the 3 amazing boys we raised together. This is their last testament as well. It made my heart flutter with excitement when you surprised me on my birthday with a weekend getaway to your dad's old cabin. We haven't been there since he passed, and there's been an ache in my bones to go up to the mountains. Plus, the boys had never been at all. The boys have been antsy as well, either due to school or just the stress of life. They had heard about it the last trip, but never had really experienced the mountains like we had. And of course, you knew we all needed a break. The most disappointing thing was when I found out you wouldn't be able to join us. Your mom wanted us to have a boys' trip. Enjoy the outdoors unfettered. I knew she also wanted to use the time to be with you. Her health hasn't improved much since Christmas, and I could tell from your phone calls that life-changing discussions would be happening soon. I didn't press the issue or show that I was going to miss you. Instead, I kissed your cheek, squeezed your hand, and promised I would enjoy myself. Even if that was only half true, I made a promise also to myself that I would give it my best. It was easy for my attitude to change when I saw our boys packing. All of them have taken after me with their love of the woods, especially Garrett. Last year we bought him a crossbow, and he was especially interested in taking it with us and trying it out on a few hawks. I brought some gear as well because I figured this would give me a chance to teach Luke how to fire a gun for the first time in his life. The boy is 8, and honestly we let his older brothers do this stuff when they were 6. Maybe it's because he is the baby and we are too protective, but I was determined to make this trip special for him. Colt was the only one who didn't seem to have that same enthusiasm about the trip. My guess at the time was that some girl had him wrapped around her finger, and he wasn't keen on being away in the hills without a way to keep in contact. In the past, before your dad died, the cabin was hooked up with Wi-Fi and all the modern amenities, but from what I gathered now, your mom only kept the bare minimum amount of maintenance on the place. This trip felt like we were saying goodbye to a lot of things, if I'm being honest. So that made my resolve to enjoy it even firmer. With fishing gear, hunting knives, bows, and other luggage all loaded in the Tahoe, we were ready to go that Thursday night. Thanks to a school holiday, we had 3 days to enjoy and get lost out in the woods, and weather said it would be clear all the way. It would be a 5-hour drive, and we would drop you off at your mom's house and be at the cabin around noon on Friday. Garrett wanted to leave that same night and hardly slept a wink. He was asking questions about trails, fishing spots, and even found a few caves he wanted to go explore. Even Colt was finally coming around to the idea of it thanks to that attitude. I think the last thing I told you before I waved goodbye at your mom's was that I would call you when I got there. Of course, I entirely forgot that cell phones don't work here. It was just a force of habit, and we laughed. You felt confident that our children would be safe with me and you would see us again on Monday morning. A short trip, but we were going to make the most of it. By now, any blues I had were long gone, and for the remainder of the trip I played I Spy with Luke. Garrett was half asleep and Colt listened to tunes as we got further up the mountains, leaving the world behind without a care. At the final rest stop where I had a signal, I checked to be sure you hadn't messaged me. I was almost about to let you know we were near our destination, but decided to not bother you. Then we drove another 45 minutes and made it to the cabin. There isn't another structure for miles. Your dad owned so much land up here with his logging business, and most of the forest is still untouched. We did see a few of the trucks, about 5 miles down the South Pass, but nothing that would interrupt the untamed beauty of the mountaintop. Luke ran up toward the overlook on the east side of the cabin and hollered excitedly toward the valley below. It echoed for miles. The cabin itself is just like we left it, frozen in time, I suppose. A massive den opens in the front with your dad's hunting trophies on the back wall. Garrett asked me if that old blunderbuss your dad kept actually fired. I told him I would hate to find out. A kitchen to the left, along with downstairs bathroom and game room and an office. I told the boys to take their stuff upstairs as I pulled off some of the drapes from the furniture. No one has bothered any of this stuff since we were last here, so it was rather dusty. But the rustic feel of the cabin was very inviting. The large back patio with sliding glass doors looks toward the east valley as well. It's right above the basement stairs where the laundry and freezer and generator are at, and it's also a perfect place to sit and drink an ice-cold beer. I have to admit I wish I had brought some. Looking toward the miles of forest, I felt lonely and exhilarated all in the same moment. The woods were so quiet, almost haunting. I wondered if during the time we spent here we would even find anything worth hunting for. Luke was first on the patio, checking out the old binoculars that were still sitting on the deck and scanning the forest for any signs of life. The forest did seem unusually still, though. He asked me if we could go bird spotting later in the day, and I said we would. Then I told him to get his brothers and help me with the fishing gear. The plan was to go to the old pond and fetch our dinner, like real wilderness explorers. The boys met me at the Tahoe, and I frowned as I saw Colt still wasting time on his cell phone. Despite the fact that there wasn't good signal here, he was waving it around in the air, hoping for one last chance to shoot a text. I tossed the phone in the back of the Tahoe and ordered him to lug the lure box, leading all of them down a western path that zigzagged to the pond where your dad fished all the time. For the rest of the afternoon, we lazily sat on the pier in lawn chairs and cast our lines. Colt brought a radio, but instead of catching any tunes, it was just weather reports. A meteor shower was expected for the night. Luke asked if we could stay up to watch it. It was just a relaxing day. I remember thinking that this was the sort of escape I needed, but it wasn't meant to last. After catching a few trout, I told the boys to head inside and shower while I went to the basement to gut the fish. We were going to eat our small catch and then probably watch one of the VHS tapes that your dad collected. The evening wore down without a hitch, and I found myself just barely able to stay awake as all of us piled on the couch to watch a classic B-movie, something about an invasion. Somewhere in the middle of the black and white film, I drifted off and the boys were just as dead tired too. I wish I could say I had good dreams that night, but the smell of burnt popcorn is the last decent memory I have. Somewhere along in the night, all of us were awakened by the loudest crash. Garrett jumped up first, and I fumbled to find the lights. All of us were staring out the back door where we saw a distinct trail of ash flowing up from the edge of the valley. A few moments later, the power in the cabin went out, and I guessed whatever had happened out in the woods was affecting the generator. The boys wanted to go investigate. I told them to stay put until I found a working flashlight, but every device I tried in the cabin was suddenly drained of power. That didn't sit right with me, and it made my curiosity intensify as I told the boys to stay close and follow me toward the impact site. The air seemed unusually still that night. Not even the crickets were stirring, and it occurred to me that we had not seen a single sign of animal life since arriving at the cabin. Did they somehow know about this beforehand? I knew that instinct could easily have driven them away, and I was getting a feeling in my stomach that maybe we should leave too. A few miles down an old trail, we found the crater. Luke excitedly hollered at the strange smoke in the area while I focused on the deep hole made in the earth. Whatever had crashed had gone down quickly, but it was too far down to make heads or tails of what it might be. I urged the boys to stay away from the edge as I tried to see if there was a different way to get down there and have a better look. Maybe it was a sixth sense that overtook me, but after several minutes of standing there staring at the hole, I got a hold of myself and told the boys we should all head inside. I promised we would come back in the morning and try to get a sample of whatever had crashed, but honestly I just wanted to get out of there, whatever was in that hole. It did not feel friendly in the slightest. They objected a little, but it was too dark for them to argue, especially when I pointed out the noise would attract predators. Colt tried to say that there wasn't a bear for miles, but I gave him the stink eye and he shut his mouth. Back in the cabin, I told them all to get to bed. Once I was sure they were in their rooms, I went out to the patio and looked toward the crater again. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up as I heard this faint noise. I couldn't be sure where it was coming from. It almost felt like it was engulfing me. I rubbed my tired eyes and collapsed on the couch. I had no reason to think anything else would happen that night, but boys will be boys. As I slept, they concocted a plan to go down into the crater. I'm not sure whose idea it was or if it mattered, but they somehow managed to sneak past me and gathered rope and climbing equipment from the basement on the way. I only found out because when I woke to go to the restroom, I nearly jumped from the couch. Luke was standing there keeping an eye on me as a lookout. As soon as he saw how angry I was, he panicked and claimed it was all Garrett's idea, but I didn't care. I just needed to know where they were. Luke nervously pointed to the crater, and I rushed into the night to find his brothers. He was right at my heels as I shouted to his older brothers, thanking the stars they hadn't descended into the pit when I found them. Colt had found a rope, though, and was testing it out against the trunk of a tree when I caught them red-handed. Of course I scolded them, but I was also thankful I hadn't arrived a moment too late, or so I thought. Luke was catching his breath near the precipice when the ground gave way under his feet. It happened in slow motion. I tried to grab him, but he fell so quickly all I could was watch and listen to his scream. The world felt like it was spinning as I shouted to him, trying to make sure he was okay. My heart racing even faster when he did not respond. I told Colt to pass me the rope. He hurriedly obeyed me, and I wrapped it tight around my waist. Then I used the heavy tree as my hoist to head into the dark pit. I kept calling to Luke but couldn't see anything. The pit felt like it was a mile long, and every second that I couldn't find him felt like a lifetime. Finally, I hit the bottom, and I tried to feel around for our son. The ground was cool, hard and filled with indentations. Something from above had definitely crashed here, and it made me nervous to realize I was standing on top of this otherworldly object. I also felt a crack in the middle, like an eggshell splintering. Something sticky was oozing out, and I imagined the most repulsive yolk. Finally, I touched Luke's hand and pulled him to my chest. I also felt blood, and that made me panic. I needed to get up and get him to the hospital. I held him against my body and pulled away from the rock as fast as I could. I still felt his heart beating slowly even though he was unconscious, and that gave me hope. I just needed him to hang on a little longer. Back at the mouth of the pit, I placed Luke on the ground and got a better look at his injuries. Blood and strange black powder smeared the right side of his face. I'm not going to lie to you, Christy. It looked bad. I tossed the rope off and ordered the boys to hurry for the Tahoe. My mind was racing as I ran with our youngest in my arms. Sure, my body was burning and pulsating with pain, but I didn't care. His life was on the line. My worst fears came true when we made it to the Tahoe, and I realized the power in the car battery had also been drained. We were miles from anywhere, and it was the dead of night. I told Colt to open the doors to the cabin, and I took Luke inside, placing him on one of the couches in the den. I then ordered Garrett get to ice from the freezer and bandages from the downstairs bathroom as Colt closed the door. He was trying his best to not cry. I was too, if I'm being honest. And as I stared at Luke's face, I realized that black powdery substance seemed to be spreading. It was covering almost all of his head now, and I shouted for them to hurry as I took his shirt off and checked for any other injuries. Garrett and Colt stood aside as I kept trying to wake their brother, shouting his name. I didn't know what else to do. I prayed to God that our boy not be taken from us. Luke suddenly took out a wide gasp and began to gag, his eyes bulging as he grabbed at his throat. That black material was now seeping into his airways. "Fight it, come on. Get him in the shower and get this stuff off him," I shouted hysterically as I tried to help him up. But it was already too late. A few moments later, Luke wasn't breathing at all, his body jerking violently to whatever that black stuff was doing to him. Then he was very, very still. I collapsed in a heap of tears as I grabbed at him and tried to make him come back to me. Garrett and Colt said nothing. I honestly don't know what they felt, but their brother was gone. I checked for vital signs a few more times, but it was pointless. I draped my coat over his body and stood up, trying not to lose my cool again in front of my other two sons. They blabbered and cried and apologized, and I honestly couldn't even begin to describe how awful I felt as I held them. I promised we would go home as soon as the power came back on. As we held each other there near the back door, Colt wordlessly pushed away and pointed toward Luke. I turned in surprise to see that our boy was sitting up, his entire body now an ashy brown color. His eyes were dark red, and that powder he had been covered in was now slowly falling off his body like a mist. The thing that infected our son screamed and began to crawl toward us. Garrett and Colt fumbled over the furniture to race to the kitchen. I ordered them upstairs and blocked the steps. The strange undead abomination that now wore Luke's face didn't seem to be able to visibly find us, shambling about the den like a mad animal. Was it searching for food? Did it intend to harm us? I found the answer out quickly as it shrieked and coughed up more powder, some of which burned my skin. I managed to wash it off in the kitchen sink, quickly realizing this alien menace was intent on killing and subduing all of us. Before I had time to even think about a plan, the thing was cornering me in the kitchen. I grabbed a knife to protect myself, its tongue spewing out of Luke's mouth and sliding across the floor. It was such an ungodly sight. I knew our son was gone, and I had to fight to save Garrett and Colt. I rammed the knife in the creature's chest and then ripped it out to slash at the throat. I had no idea if it was simply using our son's body as a host or if it had another way of survival, but I simply had to end it. The alien was stronger than I anticipated, grabbing me and pulling me toward the wall. Its skin bulged as it prepared to spew more powder in my eyes, but instead a shriek exited its lungs as I heard the sharp thud of an arrow strike it. It lost its footing, and I looked up to see Garrett was holding his crossbow, preparing to fire again as the beast tossed me aside and crawled up the side of the wall to the second floor. Garrett was not prepared for its ferocity and speed. I screamed and tried to draw the beast's attention to me as I struggled to stand, but it was already too late again. It burst out more of the black smoke, grabbing a hold of Garrett and dragging him toward the edge of the second floor railing. I motioned for Colt to run down the stairs as his older brother fought for his life, tumbling down to the den floor and crashing into the coffee table. The beast was trying desperately to consume him, stretching Luke's skin like a net over his body. I yanked Colt toward me and ran for the basement, desperate for a new plan as Garrett begged me to help. I reached for the crossbow he had dropped and fired another shot. Somehow this one bounced off the creature. It had hardened Luke's skin to become like a shell, and I was helpless again as my second son was eaten alive. Screaming for mercy, I plunged into the basement, slamming the door closed and demanding we barricade it with anything and everything we could find. Colt rushed and found several old boxes of junk and a few other items, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to do the trick. We had to find a way to escape the cabin, find help. Otherwise we will all die here, I realized. I couldn't even properly mourn Garrett when the creature began to bang on the basement door, trying to find us. Colt was trembling, clawing for an exit somewhere else. We used adrenaline to push the washer aside and found an old crawl space near to the dryer. It looked like it was used to push lint out but made wide to avoid clogs, just barely big enough for Colt to get out. I demanded he flee as I heard the door splinter and snap. Down the mountain. The rest stop was a few miles, but if he kept running, he would find it. He crawled away as I found bags of ice to defend myself with. The creature was nearly in the basement. It now took the form of our two boys combined, their arms and legs dangling like spider limbs as it raced toward me. Their heads merged into a dreadful mouth as it tried to attack. I flinched and ran up the stairs, this time slamming the door from the other side. I tried to think of anything I could use to kill the thing. The only idea that came to my mind was fire. Despite the loss of power, I knew the old propane stove worked and the fireplace could be stoked. I would have to destroy this cabin and try to make the beast burn up in the process, but time was running out. I hurried to turn on the valves and then scrambled in the kitchen to find some of your dad's old cigarettes. Ironic what killed him might be the one thing that saved me, I thought. Then I heard a noise from below like bones breaking and my heart sunk. From the basement stairwell, an abomination lurched out. I could hardly move at all now, combined with all the flesh of our 3 boys. Colt had returned to save me, I guessed, only to go straight into the creature's maw. It used their voices to taunt me, shrilling and shaking as it struggled to move toward me. I realized their combined size was too much for the beast to handle and seized the opportunity. Ran for your dad's trophy wall and loaded his ancient blunderbuss. The thing hadn't been fired in ages, but I only needed it to work, just the one time. The alien was almost on top of me, and I pointed toward its unfathomable mouth and fired. I can't even describe the explosion of guts that cascaded across the cabin, but the deed was done. I sit here now, having burned the corpses and made sure not a single part of the beast remains, struggling to stay alive and pen this confession. This testimony to our survival and the survival of all humankind requires you to believe me. I am sure the creature infected me as well, and it won't be long it will take over my mind. It's evolved since it first struck. When it took Luke, it was mindless. Now it sees that to survive, it will need to be smart, be silent and hide in plain sight. And I think it has found a way to recreate hollow shells of our boys. I keep having strange visions of them laying in their upstairs beds covered in silk like that of a spider. Except it ebbs and flows. It breathes. The creature will hide what happened here masterfully. When you come here to meet me and our weekend trip is over, you will be unaware of what transpired. Garrett, Colt, Luke, and I will smile and be ready to return home. But you must not believe the smiles. I have managed to use what little sense is left within me and hide this letter in a place that I know it can't find, but you will always check. I grow weak. My mind is not my own. Forgive me, Christy. Please make certain we do not die here in vain. Please stop it from spreading. Last week, my wife asked me if we could go camping. She loves nature. Me, not so much. Nonetheless, I said we could go to make her happy. She is excited as hell, so we pack up all of our stuff and head out the very next day. We wake up pretty early and drive out to a small secluded piece of land that my parents own. We make camp there and spend a couple hours setting up the tent and the campsite. By this time, it's the middle of the day, so we get ready and go hiking. It's beautiful up there. No cell phones, no people, no worries. It's the fucking bugs that get to me. I can't stand those damn things. After a while of hiking, it starts to drizzle, so we decide to head back. We get back to the campsite just as it's getting dark. We make a fire, eat, roast marshmallows, and tell scary stories. It was a great time, but eventually my wife starts getting a little tired, so we decide to go to sleep. We get in our tent and I roll out our double sleeping bag and we both get in together. After a while of laying there, my wife starts to shiver. "Are you all right?" I ask. "I'm fine," she says. She keeps shivering and eventually tells me that she isn't feeling well, but doesn't want to ruin our trip. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was psyched that she said that because I wanted to get the hell out of there. As I said before, I'm not a big fan of nature. I feel her forehead and she's burning up. I tell her that she may have a fever and that we should probably go home. She looks bummed, but eventually gives in and I get her up and take her to the car. She sits in the car while I pack up our things. In the middle of taking down the tent, I hear her honk the horn a couple times. I run over to the car and ask her what's the matter. I saw someone in the trees behind the campsite. I wasn't sure if it was a person, but as soon as I saw them move, I was sure it was someone, so I honked the horn. She says to me, looking pale and panicked. I can tell she is upset, but I don't really believe her, so I tell her to just relax and that I'm almost done packing. I go back over to the campsite and start gathering our things outside the tent. I step back into the tent to roll up the sleeping bag, and suddenly I hear my wife yelling my name. It sounds like it came from the woods. What the fuck is she doing out there? I say to myself, "Help, Jack! My leg is bleeding." I rush out of the tent and look towards where I heard her scream. I glance over to the car and she is asleep in the passenger seat. A huge wave of fear passes over me. I'm just standing there, paralyzed, and then I hear the voice in the woods again. This time it's behind me. "Help me, Jack, please!" It still sounds like my wife, but somewhat off. It's too raspy and deep. At this point, I'm fucking terrified and I just want to get the hell out of there. I quickly grabbed most of our things and shoved them in the car. I left the tent, but I didn't even care. I got in the car and sped away from that place as fast as I could. When we finally get home, I asked my wife to tell me exactly what she saw when she was in the car. She said it was pale and she thought it was a naked person crawling behind some trees. She saw them stand up against a tree, and that's when she honked the horn and they dropped down and crawled away. This is why I hate nature.